Deep within the fog-covered mountains of Eastern Europe, where no roads led and no maps dared to draw lines, there existed a hidden village known only by whispers among the nearby towns. The locals spoke of it with unease, saying that those who ventured close never returned. It was said that the place was cursed, that the people who lived there were born different. Their faces changed by something unnatural flowing in their blood. The story began in the late 1800s, when a small group of settlers, seeking refuge from wars and famine, wandered deep into the mountains. They found a valley hidden beneath layers of mist, untouched by the outside world. The land was fertile, the river clear, and the silence comforting. Believing they had discovered paradise, they built wooden homes, grew their crops, and raised families. But isolation has a way of twisting the roots of life. Generations passed, and the village grew apart from time itself. The people forgot the names of nearby lands. They stopped writing, stopped traveling, and even stopped marrying outsiders, for no one came. Their bloodline grew closed, repeating the same faces, the same voices, the same names. Soon strange changes began to appear. Children were born with large, glassy eyes that caught light like mirrors. Some had bones that grew unevenly, noses bending in unnatural shapes, and skin that carried pale marks like veins of marble. The villagers believed it was the will of the valley itself, that the mountain demanded they remain pure. At night, the wind carried strange sounds through the woods. Some said it was laughter. Others said it was the cries of those who tried to escape. There was a rule that no one could leave once they had reached adulthood. Those who did, they said, brought sickness and death upon themselves. The elders kept records of families, of births and deaths, written in a language long forgotten. Every year, during the harvest moon, they gathered in the square and gave thanks to the earth that kept them hidden. But with each year, their faces changed more, and their hearts grew darker. It was in the winter of 1874 when the first outsider appeared. A wandering merchant from a nearby kingdom had lost his way in the storm. He saw smoke rising from chimneys and followed it, hoping for shelter. When he entered the valley, he found it silent, the snow untouched, and the homes built from dark, wet wood that seemed to breathe. The villagers welcomed him, gave him food and warmth, but their eyes never blinked. Their faces were wrong, the skin stretched too tight, their smiles too wide. He stayed the night, but by morning his horse was gone. He was never seen again. Years passed, and word spread of the strange valley that swallowed travelers. Priests and scholars came to investigate. None returned. The mountain took them all. One friar managed to leave a note carved into a piece of bark, found miles away near the riverbank. It said only one thing: their blood is not human anymore. Inside the village, life continued as it always had. The elders taught the young that their deformities were blessings, signs that their ancestors still lived within them. They worshipped the mountain and the fog. They believed that purity of blood was sacred and that to mix it would invite death. When a child was born without deformities, the villagers grew frightened, believing the mountain was displeased. The child would disappear before sunrise, taken into the woods, never to be seen again. As the decades passed, the blood grew weaker. Some villagers began to lose their senses. Their skin turned gray, their hair fell out early, and they developed a strange sensitivity to sunlight. They rarely went outside during the day, and when the sun did rise, the entire valley seemed to sink into shadow. A few tried to leave, hoping to find the world their ancestors once knew. Their bodies were later found at the edge of the forest, twisted and pale, as though the mountain itself had reached out and dragged them back. By the late 1800s, only 40 souls remained. Their homes were collapsing, their crops no longer grew, and the river had turned murky. Still, they refused to leave. They believed their ancestors would awaken beneath the soil and restore their glory. The eldest woman of the village, said to be over 100 years old, claimed that when the last outsider entered, the curse would end. That moment came in 1891, when a young explorer named Elias Becker ventured into the mountains with a small group. He had heard the legends and wanted to see the truth with his own eyes. His companions warned him, but his curiosity was stronger than fear. He followed the narrow paths through fog and ice until he found the valley. There were houses still standing, but no smoke rose from them. The silence was heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. He stepped inside one of the homes. The walls were covered with symbols drawn in dried blood. Tables were set as if for dinner, though the food had long decayed. And then he saw them. Shapes sitting in chairs, still dressed in worn clothes, their bodies dried and grey, their faces frozen in smiles too human to be statues, too lifeless to be alive. Their eyes, large and glassy, seemed to follow him wherever he moved. In the center of the village square stood a large stone altar, carved with hundreds of names. Some were repeated again and again, fading into one another. Beneath it he found bones. Countless bones, small, large, all mixed together. He realized the truth then. The villagers had not died from plague or hunger. They had turned on one another, feeding the curse that lived within their own blood. The mountain had not needed to punish them. They had destroyed themselves. When Elias fled the valley, the fog grew thicker and the path vanished. Only he made it out. The others were never found. He returned to the nearest town, pale and silent, refusing to speak of what he had seen. He lived the rest of his life alone, his health failing quickly, his eyes turning pale and glassy like those of the villagers. Before his death, he wrote a single sentence in his journal: "They are still there, waiting for new blood to find them." The valley remains unseen to this day. The mountain hides it well. But sometimes, travelers passing through the region say they hear faint voices carried by the wind, like whispers calling from deep within the fog, voices of those whose faces were shaped by their own cursed blood.